Get started here. Hit recording and move this. Okay, folks, thank you for joining us today. Let's get started on the AEC Cloud Chaos webinar. You know, the subtitle is Lifting the Fog, How to Make Good Business Decisions with the Myriad of IT Solutions for the AEC Industry. My name is Chris France, and we'll be introducing you to the team here shortly. Today I'd like to cover a few things. First, we're going to talk about identifying needed business capabilities, and I'm drawing this analogy to the AEC industry. It's kind of like programming a building. And then we'll talk about the IT solution building blocks, which is what I would call your materials for building that building. And then we'll get into a cloud decision cube that is really the architecture. How do you put these materials together to meet your program, and then bring it all together, the construction and the facilities management of an IT system, whether it be cloud or otherwise. And then I'll save the commercial for Advanced 2000 at the end, and then we'll wrap up with questions. My goal is to get you out of here in 1 hour or less, and 3 o'clock Eastern. All right, first, I figured I'd just introduce the Advanced 2000 team that are going to be on this call today. As I said, my name is Chris France. I'm currently the president of Advanced 2000 here in North Carolina. I'm the AEC industry leader, and I guess I would call myself a cloud CIO. I work with clients to achieve their business goals and their desired IT architectures. I've spent over 25 years in IT. 11 of those I was CIO at Little. I've worked for IBM, Bank of America, Wells Fargo. I've authored several AEC Bytes articles, BIM in the cloud, and the same topic in Mastering Revit Architecture. And when I'm not a cloud CIO, I'm speaking at various events. And why don't we go left to right, top to bottom. Mark, why don't you introduce yourself, sir?
Yes, this is Mark McDonough with Advanced 2000 as an AEC application specialist, or otherwise known as the Advanced 2000 CAD BIM Manager in the cloud. I have over 35 years experience in the AEC industry, half of that practicing architecture. The other half is CAD Systems Manager for a large multidisciplinary firm near Boston, Massachusetts, supporting a very large staff. And I'd just like to say that the rewarding part for me, having joined Advanced 2000 2 years ago, has been the opportunity to take these decades of AEC experience and refocus that expertise working with our virtualization team to help deliver and support what I truly believe is the best-in-breed virtualization experience for the AEC industry.
Okay. JT?
Joseph Calamantes, thanks for all joining today. I'm the Regional Director for Advanced 2000 in the Midwest, based here in Chicago. I like to say that I'm a recovering architect, spent many years doing architecture, and realized that technology was very, very, very integrated in the way that we practice. So my interests and my activities started to focus on using technology to do architecture better, and that's how I ended up finding Advanced 2000. I was one of the early adopters of the cloud at Canon Design, and I've been with them now for about 2 years, helping them implement technology for AEC.
And Chad.
And I'm Chad Bennett. I'm Senior Cloud Solutions Architect here at Advanced 2000. I'm educated as an architectural engineer, and early on in my career I got involved with computer technology aspects, and it really piqued my interest. And so easily for the last 20 years, I've been heavily involved in IT aspects and bringing solutions to the AEC industry.
Great, thanks guys. And we'll be hearing more from the AEC team throughout the presentation, as well as the question and answer period at the end. All right, so the first thing you need to do is identify your needed business capabilities, which is your programming stage. How many of you design a building and the clients come to you and say, hey, I got a really good deal on some bricks and steel and wood, just build me something? You know, that's you can do it, but that's generally not the way it's done. You want to create a and I'll get into this with the template I have to show you, but you know, you want to create a list of these business requirements that I would say the firm owners or the principals would understand. You know, the architects, the engineers, the contractors, in non-techie language, such as staff utilization. I get that. I got to keep my people working. I can't have any downtime. You know, what IT solutions are going to help my staff utilization? Intellectual property protection and security. You know, what we're working on could be very confidential, could be government, whatever. Even client intellectual property. You don't want designs out into the public. How are you protecting that? How are you keeping keeping the bad guys out of your infrastructure? Business continuity, disaster recovery. This is kind of related to utilization, but it's what happens if bad things happen, whether it's, you know, a Hurricane Sandy, or, you know, you lose a server, or, you know, the network goes down. You know, how resilient are you to keep your operations, your business running? Communication. You know, it used to be communication. It used to just be telephones. Now we've got instant messaging and chat and video and, you know, integrated messaging. And so how does your firm want to communicate? And then this is kind of it's always been around in the AEC industry, but as of late, because of the supporting technologies, this is actually possible to do real-time project collaboration. You know, everybody that has adopted Revit for any period of time and done significant projects, you know, realize how hard it is to collaborate in real time when you're spread out all over the place. It works great when you're all sitting in the same office, but you want to do that real-time design no matter where the people are located. So that's a business requirement. Some firms have that need, others don't. Staff mobility. This is another one. It's like, you know, people are used to, you know, making the commute, coming in, working in the office, going home. Well, those days are over. You know, we want to be able to be at the job site or at the client office or home, whatever, hotel, still be able to work. And it's difficult to be able to run these AEC applications from any location. And then, of course, you always have your application support. You know, Revit, how do I do this? You know, Adobe, how do I do that? Et cetera, et cetera. How do you become better at using the tools that you have to deliver services to your clients? So these are just some things that, like I said, at our high level of the programming, what are you trying to do? Because sometimes people will ask me about a solution and ask me, what do I think about this? I said, well, what are you trying to build? You know, so it's important to really get your programming down. Next, let's talk about some of these materials. I'm gonna try to get through these slides fairly quickly so that we can reserve more time at the end for questions, because I know we're getting a lot of questions on this kind of stuff. So let me go back to the beginning of time where you're a startup company and I'm a one employee. I'm going out on my own, and all I need is a laptop. We'll call it a MacBook for that. I know the AEC industry loves the Mac, so we're gonna go with the MacBook. And I like to keep things very simple because it's hard managing all this chaos. So you've got to have some kind of construct that doesn't change frequently, no matter what new technology or what new product comes out. And I kind of look at the world from I use these concentric rings as very simple. You've got the hardware, software, telecom, and labor. And I pulled data out separate. Yeah, you could say it's software. But data, I always like to know where my data is, because you see the little asterisk here. It's the only thing I can't replace. If my hardware fails, I can go buy new hardware. If the version of software becomes out of date, I can buy new software. If somebody steals my switches or my phone system, I can go and get another one. You know, if somebody, you know, an IT person that's supporting my enterprise quits, you know, gets a better job wherever, we hire somebody else. You know, you can replace that. Now, if your data, if you don't have good backups, you know, you could have pictures of a building that's half constructed, and if you lose that, you're never going to get that back. Or the pictures of something inside of an exposed wall. You know, you're not going to get that back unless you go back and rip the wall out. So there's certain things of data you cannot replace. So you should take, you know, a great caution in protecting your data. So the same construct applies to your single MacBook. You know, you've got your hardware, software, and your data is typically running on your MacBook as a startup, single-person firm. Your telecom needs are usually your cell phone and your internet service provider. You know, sometimes it's Google Mail, sometimes you know Time Warner Cable, however you use to connect to the internet. And then the IT labor component is either you as the firm principal, owner of one, or you know, you need a genius. You know, if you got your MacBook has a hardware problem, you usually take it into the store and, you know, schedule an appointment and have the genius fix it. And so, like I said, the data is the only thing that you can't replace. So you've got to have good backups, whether it's on a cloud backup or a local USB drive or whatever. So that's kind of how the world starts out. Those are your materials. And then we get to a point, your business starts to grow. And rather than replicating MacBooks, I replicate the IT services, because I look at the services. I don't look at the products so forth. So your firm is growing. You got, I don't know, what is this, 15, 20 MacBooks all over the place. So it's exploding. They proliferate. They're out of control. You can't manage it. And so that's when firms say, hey, we really need to get a central server. So there's this proliferation and consolidation that's happened over the years. It's constant in IT. Proliferate, consolidate, proliferate, consolidate. And so we consolidate to a server. And guess what? We've got the same constructs. We've got hardware, software, telecom. This time the telecom's a little different. It's not just a circuit coming in from Time Warner Cable. It's a switch and a local area network, and then maybe the telecom coming in from Time Warner Cable. And you still have the server hardware, the server software, and guess what? Your data is still there. It still needs to be protected and backed up. And you go back and tell all your people that are working on their Macs to, hey, save the data on the server because I'm not backing up your MacBooks. And that's how it starts to spread. And your IT labor is generally, you hire a person now when you get this large. Someone that's dedicated to this, so each person doesn't have to be their own genius. And that effectively allows you to strip some of those services away from each individual user and each individual MacBook because you've loaded that on the server. So that's kind of the next phase of IT materials. You got MacBooks, you've got servers, you've got switches to connect all this stuff. And then you keep growing. Your 30-person single office firm becomes, multiple offices and, 100 people or 150 people. And you need multiple servers. And guess what? You're stamping out more of the same. It's the proliferation of MacBooks, servers, phones, and it becomes out of control. And here we go. The cycle repeats. You've got hardware and software for all these things. You've got telecom associated with each server, and you've got IT labor associated with this, and you realize, hey, this is hard to manage. It's starting to cost a lot. Let's start to consolidate. Now we got some cloud providers, so we got some more materials to play with, and that's what we hear about. So we've got, the Amazon. We'll be talking details later. You've got the Amazons, the Googles. You've got the Microsoft clouds. You've got the very, specific, Autodesk, render services clouds or Revit server, whatever. And you're starting to consolidate some of that hardware, software, and data to the cloud providers. So now guess what? The clouds proliferate, and here we go. So you've got to figure out a way to connect via your, on-premise telecom, either through the internet or private circuits. And you've got IT labor. You still need IT labor, but it's a mix. Some of the cloud providers are providing a certain level of IT labor. When you have, Microsoft Office 365, that comes with the labor to keep that service running. But you still need IT labor to connect it into your Active Directory and all that kind of stuff. So the IT labor roles and skills change, but you still need people to keep it running. So that's kind of how a lot of firms are sitting today. And then we'll come back full circle with the last of the material slide to say, look, then you're, once you're sitting on, 150 people and, 5 offices, you're wishing for the days of old when you were back to a single person on your MacBook with your hardware, software, and data. And that's really what the major, I would call the major full-service cloud providers are starting to do. Things are coming full circle. People say, oh, this is like a mainframe. It's like, yeah, or one big MacBook, or you can say it's one big Windows mainframe. So you've got companies like, IBM Global Services, and see, really, this is where Advanced 2000 plays. We've gone through all those materials that I just mentioned, and this is kind of where we're at right now, where you want to manage your company like it's one entity. You've got your data in one place, you've got your hardware in one place, software, telecom's easy to get to, it's one place. You don't have that node problem of more nodes that you have, the more complex and costly it becomes, and then you've got the IT labor that you need to keep all this stuff running. So you've got firms like I said, IBM Global Services is doing this. We are doing this, and you've got large firms in the AEC that are doing this as well. Firms like HOK, Gensler, AECom certainly doing this. I call it do-it-yourself. They've got this is not for the faint of heart. You need some serious resources as well as capital and data centers to be able to do this. But that's kind of where we're at now. So you say, gosh, all these materials, how do I decide what I want to do? You say, okay, I've got all these materials, and how do I use them to meet my business goals? I said, well, you simplify. Remember how I said we exploded and then we consolidated, exploded, consolidated. Let's try to figure out how we can consolidate. So now we're talking architecture. All right. The people on this call, I would call us, IT architects. Is what we do. We understand all of these products. I don't say we're experts on all of them, and I certainly would say that one person does not know every product on the market and how businesses are using it. But that's where we kind of take a team approach. So I've kind of expanded this 2D matrix. You might have seen it in some things that I've written or published or whatever, and I've made it go 3D. Hey, we're in the 3D world, so I made it into a cube. But like I said, the way I look at the world, I first look at data. The first thing I go after is where's your data? Where's my data at? Where's my client's data? Like I said, it's the only thing you can't replace. You better have it protected. And so I want to know whether it's centralized in one place, one location, or it's distributed. You've got data all over the place. It's harder to keep track of it when it's distributed. It's harder to back up. It's harder to protect it. It's a lot easier to protect it when it's in one location. Then I look at, all right, where are my computers? Generally the hardware and software is married together. You install software on the hardware. And where's that infrastructure at? Is it local? And typically what I mean by that, is it local in my office? Probably in some kind of a server room. I might have a separate HVAC, but typically, usually most offices in the AEC industry are not on-site data centers. That would fall into the remote category. What I mean by the remote, it's in some kind of a data center or a full-service, computing facility that has the fire suppression, security, that kind of thing, HVAC redundancies and so forth. And then I look at, all right, we can devise these architectures, and then you got to decide, well, how are you going to support them? How are you going to keep them running? Is it going to be all outsourced, IT labor, or is it going to be insourced, or is it going to be kind of a hybrid? Obviously, if you're using Microsoft 365, some of the IT labor would be outsourced. That's dealing with the Exchange server. Like I said before, some of it will be insourced if you're trying to hook it to the other applications in your firm or Active Directory and so forth. And so this is not meant to be an exhaustive list, and I don't mean to offend anybody by putting them into a box, but it could very well change. And I'll just kind of throw out some IT strategies here. This is the distributed data with local computing power. I would call this traditional IT. This is kind of where we were. I put myself back at Little, 10 years ago at Little. And then everybody says, I'm trying to consolidate, we're trying to get in one location, and then we moved up to this strategy to say, let's see, how much can I centralize all my data, my desktops and everything. And we used kind of a Windows terminal server type thing for that, and that's moving up to here. And now Little's over into this centralized data, remote, and outsourced type thing. So you can it's generally difficult to go, depending on if you're a large firm, to go from totally distributed, traditional IT with everything running local to a fully hosted cloud overnight. That takes time and planning, and I'll kind of get into that. But also, just from you got the Panzura, so that's when you get all these service providers, and you're saying, well, I can do this, I can do that, and so I got to put them into a box and say, all right, what can you really do, and do you fit into my strategy, and so forth. We'll talk more about Panzura and Amazon and so forth, but Panzura will say that they're a centralized file system, and they are. But they also distribute it. They've got local appliances that bring things locally, so it's a quasi-distributed. So you got to say, well, is that really distributed or is it centralized? So you got to look at that. I would consider that distributed because I'm still moving data. Centralized. When you get a centralized data that's remote, you're generally talking about fully hosted remote desktops to be able to get that desktop data from a data center. And then you've got this quadrant like a BIM 9. I know those guys. They've got a centralized solution, but it's typically sold to be installed and run on premise in your server room. And so that's kind of the where things roll. And I look at I put some, kind of like those menu things. I like to put these general dollar signs in here. This is why people are migrating to cloud. The materials cost less, and I can actually get more IT capabilities for less money. So in the old days where I had everything local and distributed, that's the most costly. It gets $4 signs, in relatively speaking. And then I would say the next most costly is the distributed data remote. And this is what's causing the cost, is distributing your data. It's not just the cost of the servers and all that, it's also the cost of the loss. And if you lose data, it's a lot easier to lose data when it's distributed than when it's centralized. And then back into the centralized local and then centralized remote, which is I would say the most cost-effective way to do that. All right, I won't belabor that. So now let's get into the bringing it all together. All right, I've got the programming. I know what I want to do, and I'm going to show you a spreadsheet on this. I've got the materials, and there's constantly new IT materials coming out on the market. And I've got kind of my architecture. I either want to be, all centralized local for right now, or I want to be, hosted, or I want to move to that hosted remote, architecture. And now I need to build it, and I need to manage it. And that's really kind of where we get to. All right, let me kind of bring up this spreadsheet that I have. And by the way, I'm going to make this available. I won't spam you, but anybody that wants this planning spreadsheet, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll send it to you. I just kind of want to walk through this quickly. First thing I do is
Chris.
Yes, sir.
Chris, can you make that little image a little bigger? Pump the up to 120 or 130.
How's that?
So it takes up the screen a little. You can even go bigger. There you go.
Thanks, JT. There you go. Yeah, you'll get the idea. So I've got my target environment. Let's start with my current environment. I look at, okay, gosh, what business capabilities do I need? And which ones do I have, and which ones where are my gaps? And so everybody wants, these are typical things that we run into as an AEC team. Not every firm needs this, but this is kind of what we implement for most firms. They want their stuff to be in a data center. They want it to be protected. They want their staff highly utilized. They're available, and that comes into I might break this down to a little bit. Okay, well I need to mirror their data. These two blue columns are dealing with their data. I need to back it up. I need to be able to restore it. I want to look at some business continuity strategies. I need a company-wide communication system, whether it's phones or video. I really want staff mobility. I didn't have that in the past. I required staff to come into the office, but I don't want to do that anymore for a lot of reasons. Business reasons, personal reasons for the staff, and so forth. I'd like a secure, redundant desktop. Real-time collaboration is a biggie right now. The AEC industry is very fragmented, and we've got people all over the place, different companies all coming together to build a building, and we want to be able to work with them in real time. We don't want to be moving data constantly. And then, of course, business application support. So you look at kind of where you're at, and then I want to know headquarters location, office 2, 3, 4, so forth. I want to be able to get to it from the job site, client sites, home, whatever you want, because most firms that we run into, their headquarters got pretty good services. Everything's in that office. They've got the staff, they've got the hardware, they've got the software. They may even have a generator. But guess what? The offices don't have those resources, and they're kind of flapping in the breeze, and they're wondering why does headquarters get all the capabilities. And what you want, those offices aren't any less important. What you want as your target environment, if you decided that these are valid business requirements, your programming, you want those capabilities no matter where you're at. Make sense? So this is a good way to look. If you don't need a column, then you delete it or collapse it or hide it, or I might need this 3 years from now. Then fine. At least you know what you're building. And then I'll jump to, all right, now I know my programming. Let's go to my goals. And I've kind of started to pull some of these, IT guys, we're spreadsheet guys. And so those rings I started putting in here. I want to know if the software is involved, the telecom. I want to know where my data is, whether it's centralized or distributed, local and remote hardware, and I want to know whether it's outsourced or in-house IT or both. And so I'll talk about a few examples here, and we'll go into more details. But if I wanted to talk about my business goals, and here I'm talking about backing up, maybe protecting my data, and I want to look at Office 365, so I can actually line up solutions. I can look at email hosted exchange, where I'm doing it myself. I can look at dedicated or hosted Exchange where I'm not doing it myself. I can look at dedicated Exchange where I am doing it myself, or I can look at an Office 365, and I can start putting some comments and things in here saying, look, I got all these dots, and I'm trying to minimize these dots because the more dots I have, I'm probably gonna spend more money. Either I need more hardware, I need more software, I need more people to be able to implement this. So you can kind of look at this, and I highlighted these columns here to say, look, I'm trying to get to this utopia of a centralized Windows mainframe, a hosted remote where I can get to it whenever I need to, data centralized, I can get to the remote hardware, it's outsourced, and you can say, all right, I've got a lot of things that aren't in there if that's my strategy. All right, well maybe it's a kind of a temporary thing. I can transition. The other thing I look at, talk about this real-time collaboration right here. I said, well, how am I going to implement that? I can do this. Well, the staff mobility, I got the remote computing. I can put the hardware remotely. I can look at Panzura, and this is where we're going to talk about this later. But now I can Nasuni, Panzura, Riverbed, Advanced 2000, BIM 9. These all have the ability to move data or get to remote desktops or something like that. But they all do it in a little bit different way, and you can kind of add it up. So if I look at Panzura, am I buying software or is it just the hardware? Do I buy the hardware and I throw in the software, or is that a different cost? Telecom. If I buy a Panzura solution, am I going to need more telecom? If I'm moving the files, than the bandwidth I currently own, I'm going to have centralized data, of course, so forth, and probably some distributed data. You need the appliances in the office, and then you can kind of compare these things to say, all right, which ones. If these are my strategies, which ones are really fitting in with my strategy? And if I go outside of my strategy, I'm doing it for a very good reason. And you can start, once you start putting into the picture of the way things you want to be in a year, say, you can also look at this data centralized. You see a lot of dots here to say, yeah, okay, this is where my data is centralized, but then you got to ask yourself, is it centralized in the same location or the same data center? You got to look at that, because what people are realizing is that, yeah, I have 10 offices and I just centralized all my data to the cloud, but guess what? I got 10 clouds, and I got data in 10 clouds now. So I really didn't solve the problem. I just moved the problem. And so that you'd pick up by doing something like this, by you got your real-time, your business requirements here, your IT solutions, and getting down to products now, and then you can see how that fits into your strategies and some of the ramifications. And you might see, I'll also include in this spreadsheet a list of projects that Advanced 2000 is working on at any given time for the AEC industry. There's just a boatload of things we could do for IT, and you could say, well, I've got a project here, for mobile devices on the books that IT is working on, but it doesn't really have a business requirement attached, to attach it to. And then I'll say, well, why are, as a CIO, I say, why are you doing it? If you're not implementing, IT solutions that meet your business requirements, you should stop doing it, or create the business need, or cancel the project. Does that make sense? So these are all the things that you could do. Can't do them all at once, so you've got to kind of plan them out. And I know since you can't do this all at once, you want to get to this, utopia in year one. Unless you're a small firm, it's probably not feasible. It's going to take several months or years. You might want to create your goals on year 0. This is my current state. Year 1, this is where I'd like to be next year. Year 2, and so forth, so you can see your plan. And then going back to this year 1 plan I was talking about, see if there's anything else I wanted to mention here. I think that's it. And then you get to the budgeting standpoint. All right, so how's this going to cost? And this is kind of like the value engineering stage for architecture. You got the business requirements, you've got all the materials, you've designed it, oh, it looks great, it's going to work, but you can't afford it. It costs too much. So then you got to kind of go back and tweak the numbers. And so what I like to do is I usually recommend my clients, and I do this, look at two things. All right, here's your traditional IT. Say you're a firm, never heard of cloud, don't know what to do, you've got all your stuff local. Got your IT labor local, hardware, software. You're starting to replicate it in different offices. This is if I did nothing. All right, what's your IT budget for your? What do you spend on hardware, software, telecom, people, whether it's in-house labor or outsourced. Data center, server room. If you have a server room, you might be spending some money on power and HVAC, whatever. Put together everything that you spend money on each year. Now you have to go out. I tell people to go out 5 to 7 years because you got to go through your equipment refresh cycles, whether it be your servers or your desktops or your phone systems or whatever, because you're going to keep spending money at regular intervals. And you come up with your annual IT spend. I cannot tell you how many of our clients I talk to and I ask them, do you know what your annual IT spend is? They have no idea. I said, you really need to add up your IT spend to see what you're spending. And I always like to recommend, I've done this analysis for 15 years now, and I would say it works for every size firm up to probably 3,000 or 4,000 people. You know, the AEComs, they wouldn't fall into this range. But, you know, looking at the firm revenue, I like to see between 6 to 8% of net revenue for IT spend. That means if you're spending around 3%, you may not be maintaining your infrastructure appropriately, and you may have a big bill coming in the future. If you're spending over that, then you may not be, you know, you may be spending a little bit too much. You may be spending outside of your means. But that's a good rule of thumb, and a lot of CFOs that I talk to really appreciate that, which is why I included it in here. So you can look at kind of what you're currently spending and say, all right, here I'm at 10%. These are fictitious numbers, by the way. This is no client data. This is just for illustration purposes. You'd have to put your own numbers in. And you can see kind of where you're at, 7, 8, 10%. You know, you could say I'm kind of in the range, but I'm not able to do all the capabilities that I want to do to meet my business requirements. If I do that, I'm going to be up around 15, 20%. So then you start trying to figure out how can I get the most IT capabilities for the least amount of money. And so then I say, well, why don't you put an exercise together if you quote unquote cloud your IT? What would it look like if you were in that upper right quadrant and you had a lot of services, and you didn't have to buy the big hardware servers for hardware, and you know the software licenses and so forth for like Microsoft Exchange or whatever. And so you start putting your numbers together, and you see what that does. That's why I had that number of the dollar sign smaller in the upper right quadrant, because you can get more IT for less money. And if you don't believe me, run the numbers yourself. You'll see it for yourselves. I've done this, you know, hundreds of times for many clients, and it always holds true because you're able to tap into the economies of scale of these cloud providers. They're building and buying in bulk, and they're passing those savings, so the unit cost savings, on to their customers. And so you add up, you know, this is you know, given the current capabilities under the traditional IT, you know, you can see my IT spend, it might be about the same. It went down a little bit in the first year, but then it falls drastically in future years. A lot of it is reduced IT labor, reduced hardware, you know, maybe some reduced software. Certainly the telecom changes if you have a large sprawling enterprise. And you can see, you'll see that the IT spending as a percent of net revenue will go down drastically. And then firms have a decision. It's usually one of 3 things they decide. Either I can reduce my IT spend. Hey, these capabilities are just fine the way they're at. I'll save money. You know, I'll spend 2 or 3%, and as long as you know that that's your strategy, you're fine with it. Others have said, you know, I'm running around the 6 to 8% range. I think I'm going to keep spending that, but I'm going to get more capabilities. There's certain things that I've been wanting to do, you know, video conferencing or whatever, and I haven't been able to do it, but now I can. Most firms will do a little of both. They'll save money. They might bring their range from, instead of 8%, they might bring it down to the 6 or 5%. And still get more IT capabilities. So that's totally up to you and how you want to do that. But that's really, that will help. You know, your CFO will love you. You'll get your projects funded. And then you go back and say, I've thought about this. I've got the materials. We've got a plan. And then there's, what do they say, nothing to it but to do it. You go back and you plan your projects and you execute. You buy the equipment, buy the services, whatever, hire or train the people that you need to do, and go from there. All right, I think that's all I say on that. Like I said, I'll send you that spreadsheet if you find it useful. Now I'm wrapping up here, probably another 5 minutes, and then we'll open it up for questions. Tell you a little bit about Advanced 2000. Save the commercial for the end. You know, we currently have you know, offices in 9 cities, mostly in the northeast part of the U.S. You know, which have got a lot of snow recently. But we also have partners in various parts of the country, referral agents. We've got a partner, CADForce, down in Texas, reselling Advanced 2000 solutions. We've got clients all over the international, or North America, excuse me. And our North American clients are also starting to, they have international locations. They're starting to test this centralization strategy. Most of them said, look, I want to get my North America, United States, Canada people consolidated into this strategy, and then I'm going to work on the international sites later. I've got highly experienced and certified IT engineers. We're about 160 people, been in business 24 years, and we're focusing on these managed services, cloud computing, traditional IT. So people ask me, well, what's your product? I go, well, we're not really a product per se. We kind of put ourselves in the quarterback seat of the CIO to say, look, I'm not just doing Revit, or I'm not just doing email. I'm doing it all. And it all is related, it all works together, it all needs to work together, and the money certainly, rolls into one pot. We're a privately owned company, no venture capital, and we built our company brick by brick. What markets do we serve? Of course, the AEC industry, that's what I've been talking about here today. Got a lot of clients there. And we also serve the healthcare industry, government, mostly state and local governments there, education, K through 12, as well as higher ed. Legal, that's turning into legal / financial, insurance kind of thing, and manufacturing. So we've got particular expertise in all these industries, but we do have, I would say, if you need computers, you need data centers, we've got a large representation of industries that we serve. This is just the SampleAEC client list. I won't show the other industries, healthcare and such, but we've got some. Like I said, Little, where I was CIO, we started out with traditional IT, went to centralized, and then moved to a fully cloud. You've got companies like Bowler and Cisco. They're looking at just project clouds, saying I have very specific business requirements. Same thing with Carolina Healthcare. They were doing, hey, I just want to build this hospital with a centralized remote, type mobile solution. We've got other firms that have gone, decided to go all in to say, hey, if I'm going to consolidate, why consolidate just my file system? I'm going to consolidate everything, my phones and email and corporate financial systems and so forth. So we have a few firms like that. Of course, Little's like that, Fitzpatrick, and so forth, Reveal Studio. And that's just a few small companies. I think the record right now is the smallest firm that's all in Advanced 2000 Cloud is Moorlander at 3 people. So this it's a cloud. You can dial it down as small as you need it, or as large as you need it for an SAIC or a Carolina Healthcare. And that's hopefully giving you some guidance to manage this chaos and come up with solutions and lift the fog of all of that. So whenever I hear of this new widget that comes out, oh, somebody's got this, somebody's got that, is this competition to your strategy? Does this cost less? I go, well, let's see how it fits into the matrix, or the cube. And or is it centralizing, or is it distributed? Okay, well, that's not the same as this. You got to kind of just be able to compare apples to apples. With that, I will turn it over to JT, is going to assist us with answering questions. JT, did we get any questions?
We don't have any questions right now, but there are a couple of issues that come up quite often that I think that we might want to address. If anyone has any questions, you can go over to the navigation bar for your GoToMeeting, and there's a spot there that you can just type in a question. So please feel free to do that while we're talking about a couple of other things.
Well, these were questions that we get all the time from our clients, right? We're going to share those with you now.
Right.
Okay, first one.
The first one, on your cube here, Chris, in the lower right corner, we're going to see a lot of technologies like Panzura and Nisuni and Riverbed. How do those differ from the Advanced 2000 solution, and are they compatible with it?
Yeah, well, JT, you just got this question, so why don't you answer that, and then we'll chime in.
The short answer is yes, they're completely compatible with what we do. Basically, it all goes back to what are you trying to accomplish. These devices move data around from office to office. So in the situation where you are a multi-office firm and you have one of these devices and you're moving data from place to place, and it's quasi in the cloud because Panzura and Nisuni do offer cloud solutions, and they're really using Amazon and Microsoft to house your data. but connecting all of your offices together using hardware devices. We've seen this used very successfully in our cloud. So if you wanted to consider our cloud as part of your Nasuni or Panzura solution, we could very easily integrate that technology into our cloud. Now, why would you want to do that? One of the reasons you might want to do it is to build what we would call a hybrid cloud solution, where you want to take advantage of the cloud for things that really matter, like project collaboration, so that you can collaborate with outside firms, you can collaborate with all of your other internal offices very easily, but you want to keep some things on-premise. Maybe your accounting system is on-premise, you don't see a need to move that to the cloud. So how do you get the data in both places very effectively? Panzura and Nasuni and Riverbed might be ways that you do that to get information back and forth between the Advanced 2000 cloud and your local premise. So there is no conflict, and it works very well together.
Yeah, it goes back to what kind of building or what's your architecture? Because I get this question as well. I'll say Panzura and Nasuni, very good products. You know, they work, and that's why they're doing well in the market. I said, but if your strategy is to have a distributed footprint into your offices, it works great. You know, distributed file system, that's exactly right. Yep. But then if you expect it to also be able to work from a hotel room, which you don't have that appliance, and you know, from the job site, then you got to buy another appliance. And Riverbed ran into this years ago, and that's what I said. These guys are constantly changing. They see this need, they get their feedback from the customers, and then Riverbed says, "Oh wow, you got to have these appliances in their offices. I'll create a mobile client, so that way they can put it on their laptop and they can get it from the job trailer and all that." So it would not surprise me if Panzura or Nasuni does the same thing. So that's really why it makes it a chaos, and it makes it hard to kind of keep all this stuff in your head. But you want to make sure that if you're making these decisions as the IT leader, you don't basically, you know, throw down some concrete and say, this is our strategy now. You buy a product, and then your firm owners come in and say, yeah, but I need it to do this, and it doesn't do that, and then you got to go out and get a different product. And so back to that budget spreadsheet, what you want to try to do is get the fewest number of products that meet your business needs. You know, that's why Microsoft servers and virtual servers are so popular, because you can have a common infrastructure and run a lot of functionality on that on something that you've already invested in, as opposed to getting, you know, all of these appliances or clouds or whatever. So you just got to kind of, you know, like I said, all these things work. You just got to know what your strategy is, your architecture.
Right. Another question, Chris, that we get all the time is, what about Amazon and Microsoft, especially Amazon, because they also offer virtual desktops or desktops in the cloud. How is that different from what you guys do at Advanced 2000? Is it compatible? Why would I use Advanced 2000 over Amazon?
Yeah, that's a good Chad question to start. What do you think, Chad? You've gotten that question a few times. What would you answer?
Sure thing. Yeah, in the Amazon workplaces, those are really business class desktops, meaning that their configuration for RAM and CPU, all the compute power, are really on the lower end for AEC's needs for the types of applications that you run. They're really designed to be a business type of desktop running Microsoft Office and similar applications. In terms of AWS, where you...
I'll say, don't they have the GPUs now available on Amazon?
Well, they do, and that's just what I was going to say.
Oh, okay.
In terms of the other technology, you have to build it yourself. So unless you are an IT guy well-versed in Amazon Web Services and how to go in there and build your own environment, that's really how Amazon works. There is no solution put together for you. You've got to take the Lego pieces and assemble it yourself to get everything working properly. Whereas with Advanced 2000 and our AEC industry expertise and experience, we don't just push you building blocks and say, there you go, go build it. We build it with you. As Chris has pointed out so elegantly in this presentation, you've got your materials, you've got your programming, and you come up with the architecture, and we build that with you.
Great. Yeah, I mean, I was looking at some of the Amazon. I've got. Oh, go ahead, JT.
I was just going to say one other thing to think about Amazon. You're charged by the minute. So anytime you have that cloud desktop, that virtual desktop on, under the Amazon Web Services, which is the higher end workstations, anytime you have that workstation on, you're being charged for it. So unless you can get all your people at the end of the day to turn it off, your bill is going to be pretty big at the end of the month. Their workspaces works a little bit differently. That's a monthly cost, all you can eat. But like Chad said, it's lower end office type of general office type of applications available.
Yeah, and that's what I just want to keep reiterating the fact. I mean, Amazon, they've got great products. They all work very well for the architecture and the programming that they're designed to work with. You just got to make sure you've got it. You know, you're matching the right materials to the right strategy, and then it'll be good for you. The anything else, JT? You got? I think there was one more. I think we were.
Got a couple. Yeah, I got a couple more. What about Autodesk 360, Autodesk's cloud, and their collaboration for Revit product? Is that something? How does that interface with what you do at Advanced 2000?
Yeah, that's where I defer to Mark. He's our resident BIM manager in the cloud. What would Mark say about that?
Well, you know, I'm very aware and have used Autodesk 360 and all its services for quite a while. Autodesk 360 is really just an umbrella brand name for a whole series of single-purpose clouds that have been there for the last several years, and they continually add to. So it's a disparate collection of, again, single-purpose type of services, which are all very good, but they really don't in any way do what we provide in terms of infrastructure. Now, so far as the more recent announcement, which came out at Autodesk University this year, Project Skyscraper, it's been known, has now been formally named Revit Collaboration on the cloud by Autodesk. It's interesting. It's, again, a single purpose. It just allows you to run Revit and to collaborate together actually on a cloud or web browser-based version of Revit, which is kind of cool. The trouble is that there's so many gaps and holes in it just yet, and it might be years before it's really in any way competes with its own standalone Revit products with all the various plugins that everybody uses, and as well as competing with our own sort of project BIM clouds that really truly do enable true real-time collaboration.
So that, I mean, to put it on this cube, Mark, so that Revit collaboration service, it would be kind of in the upper right quadrant, right? It'd be centralizing your Revit data to collaborate, and it would be remote, running out of Autodesk data centers, correct?
That's correct. It would be up in the upper right-hand quadrant. So, again, there's some really essential missing pieces right now because it is kind of an alpha release. So eventually it might be better, but I doubt whether they'll undermine their own product, the flagship Revit with all its super capabilities.
Well, and that's what Dassault's got that same problem. Their cloud version is good, but the CATIA v6 running on premise or is got a little bit more functionality. So I think that's coming. But this is a good point I wanted to draw your attention to say, look, I can go and buy all of these little point solutions. Autodesk got this, Dassault has this, Microsoft has that, Amazon. But that's what I was saying before. You end up putting all your project data all over the place. It's like instead of 4 offices, it's 4 clouds. And if you're trying to consolidate and not have to move data around, and then what happens is, what if I have a non-Autodesk piece of software that I want to use, like, I don't know, SketchUp or whatever, Adobe. If you're not going to be able to install that on a Autodesk Revit desktop. And so then you got to have another desktop to do that. It just gets very complicated, and the more pieces that you have, back to that, things getting out of control. The clouds are getting out of control now, and so and that's really where like I said, we certainly would love to have you call us and talk to us about some of our offerings, but our goal is for you to meet your business goals, whether you use Advanced 2000 or not, and that's what I was hoping this strategy would help you.
Chris, you got a couple more questions I want to get to before we run out of time.
Okay, got 10 minutes. Shoot.
Can users still access all local network printers, scanners, and plotters from the cloud?
Yeah, that's Chad. He's the guy on this too.
Sure thing. The answer is yes, for network printers, scanners, and plotters. So normally what we do is defer to the client software that's used to get you connected to your cloud desktop, your private cloud environment. They do a very good job passing through any local printers you have installed on your client device, be it desktop or laptop computer. And that includes network printers on your network that local computer is connected to.
Chad, what about USB drives and software keys? That, you know, the USB type of software key, can that be used on a cloud desktop? Can the cloud desktops use local devices?
They can, yeah. So USB devices, maybe if you've got a 3D mouse or a USB thumb drive for storage or a USB external hard drive, those sorts of devices can be passed through to your cloud desktop and utilized. Software license keys that use a USB fob or hardware key, those can be utilized as well, and we just really need to talk about which type of product that is and exactly how that one works, but we have definitely successfully done that for several customers.
What product was that needed a key, just off the top of your head, you know?
Most of them are these 3D render engines.
Yeah, V-Ray.
To
the one.
3ds Max. V-Ray is a great example.
V-Ray,
also,
all the time.
Yeah, and render applications for SketchUp and so forth. So that's usually where we run into them.
Okay. Well, you mentioned software licensing, and I know this question comes up a lot. You know, how do I license my Autodesk and, you know, Microsoft if I have a centralized cloud? Is it different or what?
Yeah, so for Autodesk to be license compliant, you do need to be using Autodesk network licensing. And what we can do, depending on the type of solution we're building for you, we can either tap into your existing Autodesk Network License Manager over a private connection so that your cloud desktops can utilize those licenses on your cloud desktops. Or again, if the solution warrants it, maybe that Network License Manager gets moved into your new private cloud environment. Regarding Microsoft, most situations, the Microsoft desktop applications, such as Office and Project, do need to be provided through us. And that's because of how Microsoft drives their licensing for their various desktop applications. If you have an enterprise agreement, we can look into if those licenses are portable to the cloud.
Okay, great. JT, any more questions? Oh, did we lose JT?
I see we do have a question. Can I run different versions of CAD or Revit on the same desktops? And the answer is yes. Essentially, this is a virtualized Windows desktop. So much like you can do on a physical desktop or laptop, we can install multiple versions of Revit or AutoCAD on the cloud desktop for you as well.
You just know you might need more space, huh? Yeah.
Yeah. And related to that question, you know, who does the software install? This is where we're working in a partnership with you, and so we're happy to get these applications installed and optimized appropriate for the cloud environment, but we certainly work with you to help you reach your goals.
Exactly. If you have the IT people that can do this, or the BIM team, then you do it. If you don't, then you can, you know, ask us to do it, and we certainly will.
And finally, how much bandwidth do I need to connect my offices to the cloud and make it function well?
That's another, correct me if I'm wrong, Chad, but we're kind of in transition here to get a higher graphics capability, and we like to see about 2 megs per user, up and down. You know, it's got to be a symmetric type circuit. Is that still the guideline?
Yeah, we're looking at about 1.5 megabit up to 2 megabit per concurrent session from a location, with a minimum of about 5 megabit. And really, we need that bandwidth coming from the cloud down to your location, so the download speed with your ISP. The upload speed, we typically don't need as much because under
Oh, good.
situations, it's just mouse movement and keyboard strokes.
Very good.
Oh, that's it, Chris.
All right, let's see. I'm just going to leave my my email here, phone number as contact, and we'll wrap up. Like I said, if you'd like a copy of that planning Excel template you can take and hack to your heart's content, just shoot me an email and I'll send it to you. Thank you very much for attending today. Thank you, Mark, Chad, and JT for joining me on this webinar, and I hope it's been informative. Take care. And all the people that are on this webinar, we are going to, I did record it. You'll get a link to the recording, and we'll also post it on our website and YouTube. Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Chris.